This is my second ever attempt at doing this. A year ago, I talked up here about, what was it? Creation, connection, and responsibility. And at the end of that, it was pointed out to me that I didn't really touch much on connection. So I was invited back this time. I figured, here's my chance to talk about connection in great depth. So, in the interest of connection, feel free to just cheer or jeer or comment or question at any point in this process. That will help me feel connected. So, title was Driving with Windows Open. This is more about, like I said, connection than driving. But for me, you know, if I'm in my car and the windows are rolled up, it sort of feels like a cocoon. And yeah, I can see out the windows and, you know, hear loud noises out there if there are anything, but it still feels sort of enclosed. But if I open the windows even just a little bit, it's like all of a sudden, the feelers go out and you can feel the fresh air oozing in or blowing in, and it just, for me, it's that feeling of not just physical connection, but it also helps feel spiritually connected. And another bit of intro here, this being up here today, for the last couple of weeks, preparing for this has been sort of an interesting, familiar feeling of scared combined with excitement. And that reminded me of when I really felt that feeling intensely, those two feelings very intensely. Last fall, I did my first ever skydive, and there was excitement and fear all combined in there. But what I kept coming back to get me through that fear was knowing that I was going to be very tightly tied to this other guy, since it was a tandem jump, this other guy who knew what he was doing. And I was trusting in the fact that I would land on the ground gently, safely, and all that, thanks to my tandem partner. So today, I thought, oh, I have my tandem partner out here. Thank you all. I trust in your ability to keep me from crashing and burning today. Do I see a hand back there? Oh, yes, a hand up. Thank you. Support from the audience, all right. Okay, so, yes. Connection, it might seem like that's, especially in this place, everybody's always talking about connecting one form or another, you know, just going higher and connecting with God, Spirit, and I just want to put my context for this is connection is wonderful, it's great, it's something to strive for, but it's nothing without being balanced by separation. It's like, without separation, then there's nothing to connect to. Now, granted, at sort of a higher, whatever level, there is presumably oneness. But if that's all there was, then why am I up here talking to you as separate entities out there? And maybe all this separation stuff is illusion, but then connection is also illusion. And so as long as we're here, seeming separate, then I'll keep talking. Okay. Oh yes. And YouTube. Some of you are probably familiar with YouTube. I've posted many videos up there at this point. And I learned something recently. There's a new tool, I think it's new, that I have available. I can look at sort of the analytics, they call it, the statistics, not just how many people have viewed the video, but how far into it they get before they stop looking. It's very humbling. Generally, 2 minutes and they're gone for the most part. So I appreciate you being here for more than 2 minutes and sticking with me this whole time. And I encourage you to stay awake through it. Not that I understand if you don't, but there will be a question halfway through roughly. And it'd be great if some of you were paying enough attention to be able to chime in with some sort of response to that question.
Correct. There's an exit door there and an exit door there. I mean, just in case people have to.
Oh, for sure. You are free to exit.
And I suggest everybody go home, get the video of him skydiving. It's on the YouTube. And take a bathroom break and let him run all the way through.
To up my ego. Well, yes. Thank you. So, connecting, just give you some examples in my life. There's a peace generator that I do once a month here, silent meditation kind of thing. But for me, it's all about reaching out and connecting. Actually, I do a version of that every morning before I even get out of bed. Just start reaching out and thinking of people in my life that I care about, people that I love, my family, my friends, and just holding them in my heart and feeling whatever connection I can get there. And then I just keep going on. Everybody I know, everybody I can think of, former coworkers, all you wonderful people here at Interfaith, and then even expanding on that, like the whole country, and think about different countries, trying to connect with that, whole continents, and just sort of, and take the whole world, just sort of cradle it in my heart. And that's one sort of, obviously not very physical connection, but a spiritual, energetic kind of connecting. And you can even do that with animals or entire, like whales and dolphins is one I sometimes feel like trying to connect to, or spiritual entities, Jeshua, whoever, or deceased relatives, my parents, aunts, uncles. So you can connect across, not just across space to different people and things, but there's also connecting across time. You can connect with the future. You envision something in your future, and it creates that sort of, it puts it out there, and then there's this connection between you and it. And the more that connection is there, then the realer it becomes for you, and more likely it will happen in the future, I think. Thank you. And there's connecting like across different topics or concepts. Let's see, say political spectrum, right versus left versus who knows what else. And so one can, just in one's own mind, one can try to make those connections, like, okay, how are they similar, and is there some basis that actually from different concepts spring from, sort of like spiritual paths. Some of them are very different from each other, but if you get down at the core, there's a very deep connection. The roots of them are the same thing, they're very similar. So, oh, and then it's sort of out there and thought. But then there's the physical side of thought, at least for people who are into bodies and how brains and stuff like that. There's this quote from What the Bleep Do We Know? Wonderful movie. I think that's where it originated anyway. Neurons that fire together, wire together. It's like if you have different things going on, especially if they're like emotional things that get the neurons firing, and there's different aspects to it. There's what so-and-so is doing, and there's what the weather is doing, and there's what the temperature is, and what somebody is saying, and all those things are zapping off in the brain at the same time. The more that the same things happen together, the more there are neurons somehow reflecting that experience that become tied together and tend to fire again together when any one of those pieces happens. And I can get into more of that. Well, there won't be time for that, but let's just say there is potential for dealing with things like trauma and PTSD by science has been coming up with interesting ways of dealing with those things by addressing that neural plasticity, the fact that neurons not only can start firing together, but they also can unwire if you get them to associate with different things and let go of that connection they had in the past. They can let go of their connections and connect with other things. And so it's possible using that approach to let go of trauma. Okay, so there's, yes?
So what you're describing is when smells can trigger memories, so fresh baked cookies remind you of being in your mother's kitchen as a child, because those things fired.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that's...
Yes, thank you for clarifying. Examples are great. Yes, Andy?
Body work helps to unwire things that have been wired together. Memories and...
EFT, yes. Many techniques. And one thing I learned researching this was just by putting one's consciousness on some incident, some trauma, if you do it in the right way, say while you're having a massage or something, while you're having your consciousness on it, that tends to make the connections, it doesn't break them right away, but it makes them, a little more flexible, like, it's possible to break them, whereas if you are just having them re-stimulated by outside events without putting your consciousness on them, then it just makes them wire more strongly together. Okay. Yeah. So there's connecting physically. There's touching, smelling, physical senses. That's one form of connection. There's more of an energetic, emotional sort of connection that one feels, say, if you're with someone who's sick or in the process of dying or something, and you're holding their hand and you're just with them. That's a very strong, emotional, energetic sort of connection. And then there's probably a lot of nuances between these and overlaps, but then there's spiritual connection, which the way I see it doesn't necessarily have to be an emotional, energetic thing, but more of a just intuitive, knowing connection. So, and then there's degrees of connection, obviously. There's, just simply being aware of something or someone. Like, I see there's a clock back there, okay. And then there's being in communication with it. So, okay, I'm aware of it. I'm open to communication with whatever it is, or whoever it is. And then up from there, you get not only open to communicating, but actually being in communication with the person or the thing or the concept. And from there, I call it, instead of just in communication with, there's in communion with. some sort of just being in oneness with. There's no more separation. And then there's the whole other axis of looking at this stuff is whether the connection is wanted or not wanted. If a bullet comes toward you and enters your body, it's a very, very strong connection between you, your body and the bullet, maybe you and the bullet, but if chances are, if you're normal, you and or your body are strongly resisting that connection, and that's where the trauma sort of comes from, I guess. So, here's your question. And we'll do my open mic when I finish up too, but we'll see how long this discussion goes here. I'm interested in a show of hands or any response from people. Have you ever felt a connection with someone such that you felt you were knowing what they were feeling or thinking even when they weren't in your presence? Or if, same kind of thing, finishing each other's sentences. You both start saying the same thing at the same time, even though there was no reason for that to happen. Show of hands. Cool. So you have some idea what I'm talking about. Anybody want to give any examples?
Jesus.
Okay.
Greg, there's an important distinction that I think will be helpful around understanding connection, which is connecting and then tuning in. And if you're an intuit, as I am, or you have some psychic abilities, it takes it to a deeper level, which is not necessarily where you always want to go. I understand connecting as much more superficial. And I know that's not what you mean, because you're doing your best to describe other levels, but tuning in is something else. So for example, if I were to wake up and connect with my parents, well, I could do that. It would be like a way of saying hello. They live in Canada. If I tuned into them, I would actually be able to have a sense of what they may be feeling, going through, thinking about. It's much deeper.
Right. Good point. Definitely different depths of connection.
And it takes self-control, actually. Sometimes you don't want to go there. And lots of times it's not your right.
Right. Respecting people's space.
And I think that's something we want to be careful about, even in connecting. Christian Science practitioners are really careful about this. When you ask a Christian Science practitioner to work on your behalf, they actually go into thought, and they'll work with your thought. If you don't ask them, they're not going there. That's a private domain. I'll zip it now.
Cool. Actually, given the way time is going, maybe I'll just get this open mic thing going. Because here's another question I'll throw out that you can respond to if you like, is what do you do to connect? Do you have any specific practices, rituals or whatever, or just going out in nature, or getting a massage, or calling up a friend, getting on Facebook? What do you do that helps you feel connected? Hello? Hello?
She's connecting now.
Internet.
I lately I've been connecting, not physically, but emotionally, with all those orange barrels all over town.
Oh, yeah.
And when I see them, I get a picture of what's going on in my head to, when I'm trying to change behavior or attitude or opinion about stuff. I can see all those orange barrels, being set up for new neural connections, and that's all fine, as everything is connecting like they should. But now and then, I kind of hit a barrel or two, and they get knocked all down. So I don't see that a lot out there, but it certainly happens in my head. And just trusting that that is a connection, and it doesn't have to be a good or bad connection. It is just a connection, and, you know, what I get out of it is my decision around that. So, and I'm getting a lot of practice, you know, driving in between those barrels, and when there's so many of them, it seems like they're all kind of converging, and the space for my car keeps getting smaller and smaller. You know, that can be kind of scary, but if I just allow that to happen and just connect with just the idea and let it flow someplace, go away someplace, then those barrels aren't as scary, and I can joke about them. So that's my connection to you folks.
When you asked how do we connect, I think just talking to people, looking at someone, and it takes courage and, you know, sharing a piece of your soul, and not all this Facebook stuff. Sometimes that's just so superficial and just doesn't feel good, and it feels like we're just stuck in our own heads. So just really being present and looking into people's eyes, that's so important. Thank you.
I find for myself that the more I'm open to that experience of connecting with people, the more easy it is to connect to people. I had a friend visiting from Chicago, and she was traveling by car on I-94, and for some reason I just thought she's got to be within 100 miles of me right now. And I'm at exit 175, and I called her up and I said, "Where are you? What milepost are you at?" She said she's at 75. You know, it was just right at 100 miles. And some of you met my friend Wendy last week. It's astounding, she lives in Denver, it's astounding how often I start to text her after not talking to her a few hours, and she's got a text coming right at the same time. It's amazing when you connect, if you send out your intention, and I didn't buy any of this stuff a year and a half ago or 2 years ago, it's just been a gradual awakening. And like I said, the more open you are to it, the more susceptible you are to it, the more you try and connect with someone across distances or even across a room, the better, the more easy it happens, the better it happens too.
I kind of always feel connected, which is really nice, but I think you brought up a good point too, like, you know, how deep you're gonna go into it. A quick story, when I was first trying to, you know, follow my spiritual path and all this, I had lived in England, and I decided that I would do a couple of hours and just walk down the streets of London, and I would look at every single person, didn't matter, you know, in that pathway, and I would just look at them and go, "You're my brother, you're my sister, you're my brother." And I did it for about 20 minutes, and it was so overwhelming to really, because some people would go like, they'd look away, some people would come right into your space because I think you're gonna talk to them. I didn't say anything, I just sort of maybe nodded and, or something. So it was really interesting what happened, the people that would feel repelled by just looking. And really, I didn't know Namaste at the time, but I was Namasteing, you know. But I thought, oh, I can do this for 2 or 3 hours, I can do it for all day. And I did it for about 20 minutes, and I felt overwhelmed and so, kind of full and kind of empty. It was a very interesting experience, but it's a really interesting thing to do, and I invite all of you, where you are somewhere, to just take a moment, and even if you do it for 5 minutes, everybody you pass, and you're gonna pass people you're going like, oh, no, I'm not gonna know, no, look at them. But do it anyway. Do it scared, and it's an awesome experience. Thank you.
Just another comment on rewiring connections. There are a couple individuals in my life that when I think about them, just this rage would just overflow, and I would, you know, it was at the point where I would get up in the morning and I'm taking my shower, and I'm in the shower and I'm raging at this person and going, and I'm thinking, after a while, I thought, that person can't feel my rage. That person, the only person that's affecting is me. Why do I want to feel this way first thing in the morning? This is ridiculous. You know, like, if the person not there. So I started to replace my rage as soon as I would feel it with a spiritual practice that would help me to just release it. And it's been, a few years in the making, but now if I even feel that way, I can just start turning that around immediately. And I don't feel that rage. I can actually feel other things for these people. I can feel compassion for them. I can feel, try to feel an understanding of why, that behavior might have triggered this, and just feel a lot different about those people. Doesn't always change because they're in my face a lot. Sometimes the immediate reaction is one of anger or one of, how stupid can you be? But then I try to change that around immediately because it's just me sitting there and it's just me in the car raging, and just me, so why do I want to feel that way? So this is another way to change connections around.
Just one word.
The comedian Nemo pointed out the problem of, as we're trying spiritual practice and giving up anger when we see it only hurts us. He was talking about driving and the idiots cutting him off, and he wished them a painful death. And then he went into spiritual practice, and now he wishes them a long, happy life, then a painful death. So he pointed out that you don't get right to wishing them a good life. You give them a little time before you let your anger. It's never just you go right to loving. You have to work through